มาตายฐานิยังปุตตังอายุสาเอกปุตตมนุรังเขเอวัมปิสัพพภูเตสุมานา
Hello, my friends. This is Bhikkhu Jayasara, otherwise known as Bhante J. Welcome to this introductory episode of the Student of the Path podcast. So, in this introductory episode, we won't go over too much, and it won't be that long. But what I wanted to do was kind of give a little introduction into what my thoughts and my plans are regarding this and where it might go and these kind of things. So to kind of explain the idea, those of you who have followed some of my various media delvings into, you might have noticed that at least about a year ago I did some 10-minute Dhamma short audios that I posted up on my archive.org. And so that was kind of my little introduction to playing around with something in the audio format. And probably the last 5 months or so, I've been kind of thinking about, well, maybe I can do a podcast. And so I've been kind of, rolling that back and forth in my mind. And, it's unfortunately been a busy life this past year, not only at Bhavana, but also in my travels and things like that. So I've wanted to start doing this a little earlier, but now's the time, I suppose, or now's as good a time as any. And because you know how it usually goes, if you don't start, then you never start. So this is me starting this, and I don't know exactly what to expect. The idea is to start a podcast. And of course, there's many different kinds of podcasts, and then the question is, well, what kind of format are you going to use, and all of these kind of things. And the answer might be all of them. Although initially what I'd like to do is kind of create an informational podcast, and that would be under the naming of Student of the Path podcast, 10-minute Dhamma. And so what I'd like to do is kind of in the same vein as those of you who know me from the Buddha Center on Second Life, doing my teachings and stuff there. A long time ago, I did a class, a Sunday class that was cyclical, which was called Beginnings of Buddhism. So it was essentially like an introduction to Buddhism. And I think that's what I want to start with on this podcast, just to kind of get my feet wet and get it started. So probably once I get started into the numbered podcast, which would be the next one, number 1, get involved in, kind of talking and explaining and answering what is Buddhism, who was the Buddha, doing all of these kind of very basic offerings, because I do want this podcast to be very accessible, not only to Buddhists, but also people who are kind of new to meditation, new to Buddhism, getting into it. So I'd like for this to be something that is beneficial both for myself in terms of getting my thoughts together and improving my research and knowledge and understanding and all these kind of things, which tends to happen as you begin to present and teach. But also for others, obviously, so that they can benefit from this as well. If it was just for me to sit around listening to myself talk, I wouldn't really gain much benefit to that. So, as with most things, with our Buddhist practice, this is something that I hope will be of benefit to myself and others. And so once I get going with the more educational and elementary 10-minute Dhamma podcasts, I think I'd also like to do some expanding. Maybe do some podcasts where, I talk to various guests, people who come to Bhavana, people who live at Bhavana, these kind of things. Maybe take listener questions, have some podcasts that are a little bit more interactive than just me kind of sitting here giving out information. And so I think that's one of the cool things about podcasts, is that there's this kind of wide open world of possibilities with the podcasts. And obviously, this podcast is a Buddhist podcast, and so the topics will be related to Buddhism in one way or another. When I'm talking with people, maybe we talk about how Buddhism thrives in the West and all these kind of different topics that might come up. But we definitely do want this to be a Buddhist-centric podcast. I am a Buddhist monk after all, so that is one thing I do know, at least at a certain level, to how to talk about these things. And so I'll be doing so as I present this. So this is the idea. This is the goal of this podcast, is to kind of use this medium to spread the Dhamma, to have the Dhamma be out there and approachable and easy to find and to digest by people who have been Buddhists for a long time, and also people who are new to these things. So with that being said, I think that's just about all I have to say in this introduction. I'm looking forward to keeping this going. I don't know how often I'll be doing it. I obviously, anytime you do something, it should be done on somewhat of a regular basis. But considering the time constraints and the how much time and effort and research and all these kind of things might come into each podcast, I'm probably looking at this point to it being only once or twice a month, and I think that should be good to at least start out, and will give me time to do the recording and the editing and all these kind of things. That's one of the things that I've that people always kind of, unless you've done editing, unless you've done recording, like how we do here, when we record the Bhavana videos of during the retreats, and first it's only it's an hour-long video, that's nice, but then there's editing, and there's putting it to a certain file, and the uploading and all that. It takes a lot of work. But that is something that I feel I would like to do for this podcast. So I don't think it'll be too bad. But initially, we're looking at once a month or once or twice a month. I think that should be probably a good thing to shoot for in the beginning. Give me at least 2 to 3 or 4 weeks to put it together and put it out. So friends, with that, I welcome you to this Student of the Path podcast. And until next time, practice well and be well. Bhante Jayasara signing out.